to Nigeria's output when it comes on stream in 2018. So, today, the industry is facing a shakeout as oil prices are still low and the economy is recovering from the recession. It is our hope that the 2017 NICE will provide a platform for all participants to reason together in a common objective of positioning the industry to be able to absorb the vagaries of fluctuating price regimes. Uncertainties as well as other challenges within the operating environment. Although the oil and gas business is a global one, we believe the time has come for SPE, other professional bodies in the industry, and all other stakeholders to look forward to homemade solutions that will help Nigeria cushion the effects and ride the waves of ups and downs, the good times and the bad times, in an increasingly unpredictable global market. There is no gainsaying the fact that global market conditions might be identical, but the local circumstances of nations are unique to them. And so, we believe, are the solutions. So we commend the organizers of this conference for putting up an event of this magnitude and mustering participation at these trying times for the industry, when activities are being challenged in order to conserve resources for only need-to-haves, as nice-to-haves are becoming a thing of the past. In conclusion, let me affirm that Total will continue to partner with the SPE, will continue to partner with the government, with our partners, and with all stakeholders to build and to nurture a stable oil and gas industry insulated from the oscillatory discomfort of waves, of booms, and busts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Please, one more time, another round of applause for Total. Your Excellencies, very distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we will have to tweak our program at this point because of certain important state matters. Usually, the Honorable Minister will stay through meetings like this, but he has to attend to some other matter, so we'll switch to listen to him. Once we're done with listening to him, we will continue with the presentations from other speakers. That is the little change that we're making. He is committed to partnership that would drive up the cost of price of crude, and in that process, increasing the boom in the industry. He's done this with OPEC countries, and currently he's trying to extend it beyond OPEC countries to ensure that producers get into a partnership that would drive up the price of crude. He is our Honorable Minister of State for Petroleum Resources. I call him a master negotiator. You know him as a lawyer, but most importantly, please welcome Dr. Emmanuel Ibe Kachukwu, Honorable Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Federal Republic of Nigeria. I didn't add that I learned my dress sense from him as well, so that's just, don't let him hear this I said, it's between us. You're welcome, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir, you're welcome.
The former Special Advisor for Petroleum, Dr. Boga, the Group Managing Director of NNPC here represented, Director of DPR here represented. I'll first find out where they're all represented when I get back. And of course, my special advisor, and in his own capacity as a group executive director also, Suleiman Bello. Suleiman Rabiu, I beg your pardon. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, captains of industry, good morning. The air that I see here is so tense. It's either the bubble and the burst is affecting everybody, or you're all looking expectantly to what I'm going to say next. and whether I found a solution not yet found within OPEC to solve the bubble and bust cycle. Let me first start by thanking you sincerely for inviting me to come and give a talk at this conference. When you have to address engineers, you have to get more technical and less narrative. But I was assured that I could talk as a lawyer and hopefully talk as a policyman and not worry about the technical requirements of the engineering profession. But I'm very glad to be here. Let's please start by just observing a minute of silence for those who died in Maiduguri in the course of trying to seek oil on our behalf. If you could all stand up. Thank you. May their gentle souls rest in peace. I thought it was important to start that way because sometimes we forget all the challenges that go with finding oil and being able to explore for oil in Nigeria. There's so many souls that were lost in that process, obviously left the morning that day not knowing that they were going to face the sort of experience that they did. But that is the very many challenges those of us who have been in this sector for very many years face every day, whether it's in the Niger Delta, whether it's in Benue Trough. Oil find has its own challenges, but we'll have to keep doing that because the energy requirement is just so key for the survival of any nation. Let me set the scene. I think we've had about 5 cycles of bust and boom over the last 25, 30 years. And each time we begin again as if we didn't expect it. I think a bust and boom concept has become the nature of oil, and we shouldn't be surprised anymore by it. What worries us actually is more the size each time of the differential that happens in this bust and boom cycle. And I think, as OPEC has said, the movements in 2014 through 2016, probably about 80% decline in terms of price, was probably the most dramatic that we've seen in a very long time. Before then, I think 2008, we managed to get to about $30 a barrel. In 2014-15, I think we went as low as 25. And the environments haven't changed very dramatically. We've managed through a lot of OPEC's principles to keep the price going, keep it stable at between 45 and 55. But you can see what we do every day. It's a major negotiation ploy, it's a major tactical movements in terms of supply dynamics and production dynamics. And you never really can tell, even at now, whether there's a certainty in terms of those prices. But I think it's probably fair to say that with the unity that you find between OPEC and non-OPEC producing countries, we have been able to hold prices largely within the range of about $47.55. Our expectation, obviously, in 2017-2018 period, is that hopefully we'll be able to manage that towards the lower ends of $60 a barrel. But nobody expects any price in excess of that in any future configuration. Indeed, even those expectations are going to be very, very challenged. So what does this mean for a country like Nigeria? It's loss of jobs. For the first time, the oil sector is experiencing loss of jobs. So it was never heard of. Once you got a job in the oil sector, you believed that was it. You could work there for life. But those are getting challenged. Investments are disappearing. Over $300 billion worth of investment have disappeared over the last 3 years in exploration and production. And what that means is that countries in Africa get the first hits, although we're resource advantaged. But because of the inefficiencies, security systems, inconsistencies of policies, you find that investors prefer to put their limited capital elsewhere than in Africa. So we're very, very challenged when it comes to the loss of opportunities arising from this. Apart from the job losses and investment funds, there's an infrastructural gap. Unlike most countries of the world, Nigeria, for example, has not focused on infrastructure. We have a huge infrastructural deficit. When I went to China early last year, we took documents that showed that we had about $15 billion worth of infrastructural gaps in the oil industry, and that goes for anywhere from the crude pipelines to the refined petroleum pipelines to production facilities. Huge infrastructural gaps, and unfortunately not an opportunity to be able to replace those, because a lot of those infrastructures were provided by government. In my view, in a business process, that really wasn't the right process. We didn't engage the private sector sufficiently. So now that we need to bring them in, it's basically a new field for everybody. So there's a huge learning process for the private sector. And one of my greatest work, really, is to move the dialogue away from the public sector finance infrastructure to private sector supported and financed infrastructure. And as you look at what we're trying to do with refineries, what we hope to do with the new petroleum policy that we just passed with pipelines, the whole idea is to move very aggressively to the private sector to provide the funding for this. Because government doesn't have it, government can't do it, government does it at a very expensive rate, and at the end of the day, the nation loses a lot of money. The other effect of this whole bust syndrome for us, of course, is financing our development. We are going through 3 cycles of 3 quarters of deficit budgeting, and there's a need to climb out of it. But in the absence of proper pricing for petroleum products and proper demand, you're going to continue to struggle. So for countries that have not saved, and we haven't saved sufficiently. I was meeting with my colleagues in UAE and Saudi Arabia, and sometimes I'm ashamed to say what I have in my reserves. Because while I'm celebrating reserves of $30 billion, they are celebrating reserves in excess of $1 trillion in the case of some countries. So you wonder what happened, because for most of those countries, we end fairly close to what they did. But they managed to save and save a lot. They managed to invest externally in terms of, Saudi Arabia began to invest in filling stations in the US when I was still working for Texaco in the 1980s. At the time, nobody even thought that was a concept. But they began to invest massively in filling station development downstream. UAE began to invest very massively in hedge funds and buying up real estate properties all over the world. So countries who were smart enough, invested their money right, and today they can be cushioned by those investments. Unfortunately, we didn't. But we did one thing, though. We sucked out a lot of our money, a lot of fraud, a lot of diversion. A lot of our money is sitting in countries where we can't find them. And even when we find them, they give us conditions under which they're going to return those money. We went through processes recently of a country that wants to return money and giving us terms where they must be put, what they must be invested in. This was our money, by the way. But we so belittled ourselves by what we've done with oil proceeds that nobody in the world gives us sort of respect. And that is why the efforts of His Excellency the President, Muhammadu Buhari, to focus on corruption is very, very key. Because unless you deal with that, we really cannot begin. If you see some of the things that get published every day, I'm almost ashamed to read them. And one of the things that I had to do once I became Petroleum Minister, getting into OPEC, was first to get away, to bring the trust index up. Because our trust index had depreciated so low that even attending foreign meetings was a disgrace. If you find all the stories that come out of a country to be negative, to be one of corruption, to be one of diversions, how do you sit amongst your peers to even be able to have a conversation? Hopefully, His Excellency has been able to do something about this, and we're beginning to see a return of normalcy, but still a long way to go, still a lot of work to be done, still a lot of challenge in the sector. But these were the effects of what we had to do with the bus situation. Now, what does the future portend for us? Not very exciting. At a time when we first need to deal with systemic issues in our system, systemic corruption, systemic controls, politicization of the economy, at a time when we have to fight those processes even to make a headway, our peers are leaving us behind. Who would have believed that Saudi Arabia, for example, would suddenly begin to think of floating bonds? Who would believe that countries within the UAE will begin to cut costs very dramatically, begin to look at unemployment, begin to address efficiency in production, because they had so much going for them, and they are still the lowest cost producers in the world. Our cost per barrel today is about $27 a barrel for JV fields. But yet, in Saudi Arabia, it's about $9 a barrel. So we are way, 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 way apart in terms of cost, that anything that happens will hit us and hit us very hard. So whilst that is going on, people are moving away from oil. The lifespan of oil, from whatever calculations you do, is probably within 25 and 30-year period. That's what it is. Everybody's moving away. Electric cars are taking over. Environmentally friendly power sources of supply are taking over. Solar systems are kicking in. So very soon, what will happen really is that even the funds to be able to address your oil exploration will become not available. Because funds follow market, they follow returns. And if returns in oil continue to sag the way they have sagged over the last 2-3 years, there'll be no future for oil. So when people say we have a bit of time to change, we really do not have any time. At best, we probably have not more than 5 years, critical 5 years, to make very dramatic decisions in this country, in this field. And what are those decisions? First, the policy is got to be very bold and very consistent and very long-termed. It is not going to be a policy that changes with the coming of any new regime trying to tinker with concepts. People must know the basis upon which they invest. And the oil outlook is a 25, 30-year period. It is not a 5-year, 10-year period. Nobody invests money in oil on the basis of 5-year, 10-year returns. So we've got to begin to look at very long-term policy directions. 2 is the fact that we must deal with inefficiencies within our system, whether it be embedded within our national oil companies and parastatals or the ministry, or be embedded indeed in the private oil companies. The reality, whether we accept it or not, is that every side of the aisle has benefited from this lack of efficiency. A country where after the prices moved past $20, we couldn't even enforce the PSC requirement terms that will enable us to negotiate with multinationals to claw back what has been calculated as close to 60 billion of monies paid to oil companies that didn't get into Nigeria because people didn't do their work. People didn't go to. That's the level of inefficiency that we've had. And so when you look at the cost of production in Nigeria, it remains blatantly high. And even though we've been singing over the last 2 years that we need to drive those down, the current figures that I still have, showing me the numbers of last year, have not shown me a major dramatic reduction in cost of production. So we're going to not only force this, we're going to compel it. Because there's no way this country will produce oil at the sort of soaring prices that we see. There will be no margins left for this country. So only oil companies who are able to be efficient, who are able to drive down costs, will have a footage in Nigeria. It's as simple as that. For me, you rather leave the oil in the ground and produce at a cost where it makes no sense. So cost is going to be a very high driver. So that's certainly one area that we're focusing on. We're working collaboratively with the oil companies. But let's make no mistake about it. If we cannot negotiate it down, we will compel it, or we will stop the production. It does not make any sense. So the time has come for all the, the oil industry got very spoiled. Everybody who quoted for jobs quoted times 2 or 3. But now the whole world is slamming down. Everybody is going down. Cost of steel has gone. Everything is going down. And we must recognize those costs. It's no longer sufficient to say, no, Nigeria is unique, security considerations. Oh, sure. But what is the security component in the cost of production? $2 to $3. So it is no longer enough. And even within security, collaborative means of addressing security must begin to take place so that those costs must be driven down. If there's any single item that requires to be dealt with yesterday, it is the issue of cost. It is the issue of cost, gentlemen. And I charge you, as members of this very august body, your role in helping this cause is a very dramatic one. Because you must begin to look at your skill sets, your national interests, your ability to help chart the path of reducing costs for producing and finding oil. So that is very key. Now, the other thing we need to do definitely is focus on our infrastructure. And like I've said, we have a huge infrastructural gap. And we need to begin to address that. And who else can address that better than engineers? We need to begin to address infrastructure. And we need to begin to set incentives for Nigerian companies who are willing to fund and invest in infrastructure. We need to take away government monopolies in these infrastructural holes so that the industry can grow. If you sit where I sit, what I see is an industry that is completely clogged, almost bedeviled by a push down. Everybody pushes it down. Everybody sucks it out. Everybody pushes it down. There's too much monopoly in the industry. I'm going to be working with NNPC, with all the parastatals, to loosen the grip in the oil industry so that the industry can move, industry can grow, industry can invest, and private sector can have the right foothold for the next generation of activities in this sector. So there is a lot of urgency for us. Then we need to begin to save. How do we get to a point where, irrespective of pricing, if you look at the new policy we just enunciated, irrespective of pricing, there must be a savings for every barrel of oil. We need to go to a mechanism where, irrespective of pricing, we must find money that we put aside for our children. One of the things that interested me in one of the recent visits I did to my colleague in Saudi Arabia was the number of wells that have been discovered, capped, and left unproduced. And when I said, why are you doing this? He said, well, for future generation. I mean, they are already finding, keeping, storing, reserving, blocks of future generation. We are holding back, even in cases where there are opportunities for low production We have situations where those are being held back by the individuals who have titles over those acreages. One of the things we're going to be also working with major oil companies is how to release a lot of the acreages that are not being explored today because they've not found them to be marginally wise to do so. There are lots of marginal field companies now, Nigerian companies, who must be boosted to be able to get into these fields, get the right incentives, and begin to produce this oil at far less cost. So there's a huge systemic movement in terms of what has to happen in oil that needs to happen over the next 5 years for us to have any foothold in terms of what we're doing. So we've talked of infrastructure, we've talked of cost, but again, investment play. I've spent a huge amount of my time just going not only to the chairman of most of the major world producers to make sure there's an alignment between them and their local MDs. But we need to also look at regional interests. Why are we still, for example, today looking at selling crude on a theater-by-theater, cargo-by-cargo basis, when we know that a lot of Nigerian oil is still lying on the waters, untaken because of the challenge of the market? We must begin to look at regional market specializations. We must begin to look at long-term contracts. We must tie long-term contract opportunities to infrastructural developments. So if you want to continue to lift oil, how do we ensure that you also invest in locally in the refineries? We must challenge the oil companies to look at economic models that are not just to win, work, and take away, but indeed to win, work, produce, and process locally so that you can have a lot more mileage in terms of the income stream for government. So there is a lot of challenge. And then then security. Security is key. In the past, we've been fairly decorative about security issues, but I think the last 1 year has shown that if you really substantially engage and intensively find a model, even the militants will negotiate and listen. I'm happy with the cooperation we've gotten so far that has brought us back to the number of barrels where we are today, but a whole lot of work needs to be done. It's a very volatile situation. And a lot of work we're going to be doing in a futuristic basis will be to see implanting of a model that enables people within certain localities take part in the economic benefits that come from producing oil, whether it's pipeline security, whether it's modular refineries like we talk about, whether it is logistics, whether it is employment. Individuals who are resident in the areas where the hazardous effects of oil exploration hit most must see for themselves the immediate turnaround benefits to those communities. That is ultimately where the peace is going to be found. And a lot of my work, together with the Minister of Niger Delta and the Vice President, are huge, quite frankly, on this. And we'll continue to do this. We're almost at the threshold of releasing a document that shows the amount of cross-border investments in these communities from the oil sector, not just from government, from the private sector themselves, in terms of what they put in, from NDDC, and collecting that. It's amazing the huge amount of money, really, that is available to these communities. What has been missing is been a collated attempt to look at this investment and be sure that the communities are involved in the decisions on what they invested in for purpose of those communities. And that's one of the things that we're beginning to come through a multi-sectoral and multi-departmental and ministerial teams. So, ladies and gentlemen, we can go on and on, but the reality is tomorrow is a lot more challenging than today. Tomorrow is going to be a lot more uncertain than what we see today. Tomorrow is going to be left to the individuals who are able to cross the threshold of mediocrity and find new creativities. I'd like to be able to find out what year I will be able to stop bringing in VLCCs into Nigeria, crude production platforms into Nigeria because they're being made here in Nigeria. I would like to be able to find a 10-year program in which, and we're going to be coming up with us, where oil companies are told that in 10 years, most of the things that you require to produce oil must be done out of here. And force Nigerians, who have shown a lot of ingenuity when you give them the opportunities, to begin to work collaboratively with foreign investors to set up models for those production of those platforms in this country. So we can generate the jobs, we can create efficiency, we can reduce costs, we can create employment for people, we can at least create an economic activity layer that is able to permeate the entire spectrum of our population. We talk of diversification and moving away from oil. There isn't much of an alternative to it. But guess what? Unless oil finds its foothold and has the right margins, that diversification will not work. you will need success in oil to create a success in diversification. And I urge all of you, as you spend time over the next few days deliberating on the challenges in this industry, do not despair. Do not lose hope. Do not worry. Do not be frightened. Be challenged by hope. Be challenged by creativity. Be challenged by enthusiasm. Be challenged by a burst of national zeal. And believe that we can do it, that we can turn around the oil economy in this country from years of waste, years of lack of savings, years of lack of innovation, to years of challenge at very minimal price thresholds, because that's what we're going to have. And I believe that nobody could live that challenge much more than the SPE. I thank you very much for listening.
Please keep the applause coming for our Honorable Minister, and indeed, the champion of local content. You've heard him working towards drafting a 10-year plan that will ensure most of the things used to produce oil are produced here in country. One more time, a round of applause for Dr. Emmanuel Ibe Kachukwu. Drive down costs, save for the future. And of course, success in oil will drive success in diversification. Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, very distinguished ladies and gentlemen, can I appeal at this point that at any moment when the Honorable Minister decides to continue to other matters, please remain seated. Everyone remain seated. People of the press, I know you want to interview him, but bear in mind he is rushing off whenever he gets up. He's rushing off, so please remain seated. Avoid any kind of discombobulation at that moment. Please remain seated. Thank you. Let's now continue with our discussions and switch gears to another sponsor's remark. And this time, please welcome with me the Managing Director of Seplat Petroleum Development Company. Welcome, Mr. Austin Avuru. Again, he is, as I said, he's attending to other state matters. Please remain seated, I beg of you, so we don't have any kind of topsy-turvy situation here now. The people living with him, most of the people are in his entourage. Just remain seated. Thank you. You are all far too kind. And always remember, there's an award for the best audience to a conference in Washington, D.C. in December. And you are all in the running to win that award. The only snag is the MCs receive on your behalf and disburse on your behalf. So please encourage me to get the money. Thank you. Now welcome with me, Mr. Austin Avuru. Sponsor, please. Sponsor, sponsor. Sponsor, sponsor. Yes. Sponsor, sponsor. Yes. Yes. You're welcome, sir. You're welcome. Yes, sir.
Very distinguished ladies and gentlemen, let me stand on existing protocol that has not been announced. It is my very profound pleasure to be standing before this august gathering, representing a very modest independent E&P company that managed to join the big boys in sponsoring this opening ceremony. I'll spend my 5 minutes discussing just two elements of our industry, which indeed also shape our future at Seplat. One of them has been discussed very extensively by the Honorable Minister of State for Petroleum. Because even the conference theme talks about boom and bust, which means we still believe that at $50 per barrel, this is the bust. I think it is time to start readjusting to the new reality that at $50 per barrel, it is not the bust, it is the new price for oil. And therefore, the only thing that can change if the industry in Nigeria has to remain relevant is cost. At $27 per barrel, as the Honorable Minister said, we are competing with shale producers for cost. So if shale producers become more profitable than us in the Niger Delta, we might as well quit this business. That's the new reality. It's not talking about bust, it's talking about cost. How did we jump from $4 per barrel in 1986, T1 plus T2, to $30 per barrel in 2017? We have to retrace our steps. The new reality is $45, $55 per barrel, because today at that price range, shale oil is possible. And therefore, I emphasize, cost is the issue, and the efforts must be collaborative. Not necessarily enforcement, as the Honorable Minister said. Everybody must come to the table to find a solution. From the security issues that account for a good chunk of the cost, to contracting cycles that are simply unreasonable that account for a good chunk of the cost, to even tariffs for moving our crude oil and natural gas. We must sit at the table and arrive at a cost of production that makes $45 oil profitable. The second thing I will speak about, and I've always spoken about this, it's at the heart of our existence as Seplat, and that is domestic energy security. We have now to start looking inwards. We have now, as a nation and as practitioners in this business, to start changing the narrative of oil and gas from being just a revenue earner for government to being an enabler for economic activity. We in Seplat are proud to be leading the initiative for domestic gas supply. At our modest size, we are probably in the last 3 years the biggest investors in domestic gas supply to power our industries. We have, in the past 36 months, added 375 million scoff of new processing capacity for gas. We are striving in the next 24 months to add another 300 million scoff of domestic gas processing capacity. We, in fact, as a modest independent, are targeting processing capacity of 1 BCF of domestic gas per day by 2020. So when we speak about domestic energy security and looking inwards so that by 2040, when cars no longer run on combustion engine in Europe, we will find use for it here in our domestic economy. And we at Seplat are proud to be part of that initiative to emphasize the fact that this industry must benefit this economy, and we start the charge with ourselves as independents. Thank you very much once again. I'm very proud to be here with you at this opening ceremony. Thank you very much.
Please keep the applause coming for Mr. Austin Avuru. So when next power is restored in your estate and your children shout up NEPA, hush them. Tell them to shout up Seplat. Augustine, is that okay? Please, one more time, round of applause for Seplat. Thank you. Your Excellencies, very distinguished ladies and gentlemen, to the very final sponsor's remark before we get into the special guest presentations, please welcome the Group General Manager, NNPC R&D sponsors, Bola S. Afolabi. Sponsor, please. There are four sponsor. There are four sponsors at this event. Sponsor. We can't get tired because one of them might get angry and off my mic, and you won't hear me. Thank you.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you all. I'd like for you to kindly permit me to stand on all the protocols that have been established. Basically, our industry is characterized by what the last two speakers have spoken about, which is dwindling production, poor reserves. Please go ahead. Yeah, poor reserves, optimization, high cost of hydrocarbon production, and the likes of that. And what we are to do in R&D, basically, when we were set up about 40 years ago, is to create an opportunity for a research entity that will produce breakthrough scientific discovery, that will develop solid laboratory analysis, and will grant all his numerous customers the ability to spend money, less money in Nigeria, to get the best of good research ability and, of course, oil and gas laboratory facilities. We were set up about 40 years ago, as I said, 1977 to be precise. We are, please go ahead. When you see my hand, please do move on. Yeah, thank you. We are well resourced. Our personnel profile is about 40% to 42% of our personnel have top-class academic qualification, bachelor's degree. Well over 45% of that are well equipped in the sciences, the geosciences, with master's degrees, and well over 15% of the same personalities we have in R&D are PhD holders. On top of that, we have a number of professors and research associates working for us. So in terms of personality, we're well resourced. There's no doubt about that. What do we do, and what can we do for you? Because this week, the primary objective of being here is to find new ways of doing business and do it very well too. These are basically some of the key activities we conduct in the upstream sector, midstream, and downstream. I'm sure many of you, our customers, can identify with these services. Bioremediation studies, we do a lot of that. High resolution biostratic sedimentation studies, we do a lot of that. And of course, many of you come to us for your PVT analysis. Apart from people, we are equally well equipped. We have loads of equipment, modern top-level equipment. And where we, again, if you look at one of the commonest things you do with us now is crude assay. We have two top-class international equipment that can pride itself among the best in the world, where we conduct crude assay and, of course, PVT analysis. We also, in addition to people, where we do not have enough people and enough equipment, that we, please move on. I'd like to keep this within the 5 minutes. We are characterized basically by three key principles: solid processes, qualified people, and of course, our business is driven by top-class technology. And I'll be sharing with you in the course of this discussion the way we do some of these things. Fingerprinting has come very, very popular. Here are some of the fields and reservoirs where we've conducted fingerprinting analysis. And some of the big-ticket items where we have excelled pretty well are all written on the board there. We've developed a lot of integrated studies on the Anambra Basin and the Benue Trough. We are working at the moment with a number of collaborators, whom I will share in a moment. So just as a stamp, you can see some of the things we've done in there. Very quickly moving on. Please, next. Next. You're going back? Next. Okay. I've talked about this. The two previous speakers have spoken about this. As I said, you're all familiar with this. Our industry is characterized with high rate of depletion reserves, with, you're jumping. Okay, anyway, the message is that we need to find solutions to the industry's major problems. And this is why we are here as R&D. NNPC Research and Development Division, where we do not have the people or where we do not have sufficiency in the equipment, we collaborate. We have 2-3 major collaboration initiatives at the moment with Schlumberger and Halliburton, where with Schlumberger and Halliburton, you know them, they are global giants. We conduct exploration resource and risk assessment in the land basin. We also have an agreement, technical partnership, on wellbore and stock pipe, wellbore instability and stock pipe issues. With Halliburton, we are looking at pipeline intervention to actually resolve a lot of the problems that are happening in Nigeria Delta at the moment. But let me tell you one thing that really we are geared towards now. We have a partnership with a young Nigerian company called Cypher Crescent. We're very proud of this initiative that has actually dovetailed into a very solid collaboration with this entity. Cypher Crescent, this is actually a very, it's what I call a significant proportion initiative. Here is an entity that has developed top-class technological solution that will change the way we do business in Nigeria. And I promise you, this will change the way we do business in Nigeria. At the moment, they're using a solution called Sepal. We're working together with them on that. That solution enables you to cluster together all the reserves database, all the reserve data, segmented in different portfolios, like geophysicist, thank you, like petroleum engineering information, subsurface information, even FDP information. These are all clustered and scattered around in all our various offices. But what this initiative has been able to do is to put them all together, combine them, integrate the data, work around the data, and ensure that you have solid well optimization, and at the end of the day, you put money on the table. Major milestones, just to round up very quickly. NCDMB, top class. We are an entity that is the research center cluster for NCDMB. We work very closely with them, and we have been designated as an entity where you can all come for your research initiatives. We work closely with international organizations as well. Please move on. We work with Saudi Aramco. We are in different study groups with other international entities. This is some of the initiatives we are doing with Schlumberger. You can call on our booths. You will see that next. You will also realize, I've talked about the wellbore stability and stock pipe. If you also come to our booth, we share a lot more about that with you. Next. Now, really, okay, this is one of the initiatives, again, we have with Neftex, with Halliburton. It's a Neftex technology that basically guarantees you that you can pinpoint when you are searching for oil up to about 75 to 80% degree of confidence level. Using this solution, hopefully it will save a lot of cost, enable you to pinpoint at that same spot where you're looking for oil in a very large quantity. Mainly being developed for the frontier basin, and I hope that we'll be able to go back to that zone and that region pretty quickly. We are working right now for OPEC. That's a project which is very, very dear to my heart. We're working for OPEC at the moment, characterizing Nigerian NGLs and condensate to enable us as a people, as a country, to stay within the quota that we're being granted by OPEC, so that we don't produce volatile oil for another set of oil. We don't produce condensate as oils that are flashy. We stay within that quota, and Nigeria can get its optimal opportunities that has been reserved for the country. So we are continuing with that initiative. Our value proposition is going to be smart, pretty. If it's not measurable, we're not going to do it. If it's not realistic, we will not promise you that. And what I'd like to conclude with is that our interventions are all smart interventions. You can question us, you can query us, and at the end of this conference, say by next week, we'll be knocking on your doors, asking you to come forward, put something down, and I promise you one thing: no cure, no pay. No cure, no pay. And in the course of this conference, if you do come to us to ask for any research opportunities with us or any research initiative, we promise you some 10% discount. I think that will save a little bit of your cost. 10% discount to any one of you who, in the course of this conference, come to us. Our normal charge, you get something off it. Thank you very much. Your laptop. Oh, my laptop. Okay. All right.
Thank you very much, NNPC R&D. One more round of applause for them, please. Our next speaker, having worked for Texaco and ARCO, and currently Chevron, where she is General Manager for Chevron's Southern African Business Unit in Houston, Texas, has of course contributed over 3 decades of excellent service to this industry. Began of her leadership in the SPE as a student section officer at the Texas A&M University. Through commitment and love to the SPE service, she rose through the ranks as regional director, as section chair, and one time international vice president for finance. Ladies and gentlemen, the first female SP president in over 10 years. Please welcome a distinguished member for 41 years, our president, Janine Judah. Can we get the applause louder as she makes her way here? You're welcome.
Ututu Oma, Ekado, and good morning. It's with great pleasure I stand before you as your 2017 International SPE President. I want to thank all of you for your membership, for volunteering, and for your attendance here at NACE. I've traveled extensively in Africa throughout my career, but somehow I've always missed coming to Lagos. So this is my first trip to Nigeria, and I hope it won't be my last. It's also a great commentary on the high level of SPE involvement and professionalism here in Nigeria, that all 5 of the professional sections here in Nigeria will be recognized at this year's annual technical conference, either with the Gold Standard Award or the President's Award for Section Excellence. That's a real accomplishment for all 5 of the sections here. And it just shows what a great resource you have here in Nigeria with your local sections in SPE. This is by far our largest concentration of members in Africa, and by far our most involved members are here from Nigeria. It's great to be here. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about, I was asked to speak on the theme, the cyclic nature of our business. Several people have already commented that we're in a 5th cycle, at least in my career, of a boom and a bust. And it's never fun on the downturn, but it's always a lot more fun when you're riding the top of that wave. But that's a common, not only for all commodity-based businesses, but really for all businesses in general. All businesses have cycles. It's the nature of capitalism, and ours just tend to be very spectacular and well reported in the industry and in the news. But I wanted to at least talk about the theme in threes. If you've ever heard me speak before, I usually speak with 3 words. And my 3 words all begin with R when I talk about what's going on in the industry and riding the wave. The first part and the first thing we always do in a downturn, at least in my experience, has been retrenchment. We pull in. We cut capital usually first, cut those drilling rigs, cut anything that costs a lot of money. Often the second phase is cutting operating expense, often with layoffs, cutting people. We may cut out workovers, things that we can defer. We will often cut maintenance, things that can be deferred, often get deferred in a downturn. We always go to the contracting community. And I do emphasize a lot, and I did in a prior JPT article this year about talking about the need for the partnership with our contracting and service communities. Those of us that work for operators, we know that we cannot execute our projects without you. And yet, in the downturn, it's where we always go first. So I'll talk a little bit more in the 3rd R about how we can look at different commercial models with those that we work with in the service community. But this downturn has hit the service community especially hard. The drilling contractors, the service providers have all been hit especially hard in this downturn by not only our need to cut costs for those of us that are still doing things, but just the general decline in activity. And then we cut and retrench, and then often we look also to the government, which is what the minister also talked about, a lot of change that's going on here in Nigeria with different pressure on the government to restructure the commercial models, to do things a little differently in order to have enough profit spread around so that people will continue to invest here in Nigeria. But always the first R in a downturn has always been to retrench. It's always a cut, it's always a pullback, kind of like a turtle going back in its shell. We get into a protectionist mode and we try to protect our capital and protect our projects. And that's what we've always done in every cycle that I've been in. But the second R is the one that's exciting, and particularly for someone who's president of an engineering organization as I am. And I call it's rediscovery, innovation. We have a history in this industry of innovating. I call it innovating through desperation. Often when things are going well and we're chasing the drilling rigs and there's a lot of activity and the money is flowing, we don't spend a lot of time thinking about different ways to do things, about different ways to manage our reservoirs, different ways to handle project management. We're too busy working to think about doing something different. And we have a history that in the downturns is when we start looking around for new things to do. And this year as SPE president, and it's been an interesting year to be SPE president because it's been a very transitional year as far as the economy. But I've noticed as I travel to conferences such as this one, a lot more of the exhibitors tell me that people come to them looking for new ideas. They're more interested in what the new products are, the new services. They're looking for innovation. A lot of the people in the industry, when I talk to average engineers, are talking about innovation. Management is often more interested in new ideas and applying them, giving you that first shot, those test projects in a downturn when we're really looking for different ways to do things. So we're trying to do more with less money, but we're trying to be more efficient and more innovative. And so rediscovery of good engineering is a big part of every downturn that I've been involved with. Also part of the rediscovery is efficiency, and other folks have talked about this already this morning. We look at our portfolios, we look at where to invest, we look at where our operating costs are high or low, because when I speak to students especially, I tell them this is the oil business. And for those of us in IOCs and independents, those of us in the for-profit community, we measure that in dollars. That's how success is measured. And so if we're not making money, then we're not being successful. So we have to be able to make money at the investments that we make, and that's part of just being in the business that we're in. Another good part about rediscovery that a lot of people are talking about, and when I get asked by audiences what are some of the new ideas and the new things that people are talking about the most, the biggest one is big data. It's something everyone is talking about. It's something some of the larger service companies, particularly Schlumberger and GE, are putting a lot of money into. And it's something that a lot of us are looking to help increase our efficiency, to better manage our oil fields, to better manage the data that we can and do generate. It can transform the way we operate if we learn how to apply it well in our fields. But big data, the applying of data analytics to what we already know and do is definitely a coming trend and something that a lot of companies are talking about. Another innovation that I hear a lot about as I go around the world and talk to audiences in the rediscovery area is around automation and robotics. We've reached a tipping point in the cost and the robustness of automation to where we can put it not only on giant, expensive deepwater installations, but on average, everyday wells out there that have been producing for a long time. So automation and sensor technology has really reached a tipping point in cost, efficiency, and robustness that I think will be another innovation that you'll see a lot more of in the next 5 years. Robotics, particularly drone technology, is something that we're seeing more application in the oil field, particularly for monitoring of operations. Drones are cheap. They're pretty easy to, well, your kids can fly a drone. And the sensors that they can apply on those are just amazing. So we're seeing much more interest and use in robotics, particularly drone technology in our operations. And then another innovation in that rediscovery space that's really reached a tipping point in the recent years is visualization and use of that for training. All this technology is coming into the oil field from gaming technology, from Silicon Valley and from the games your kids play. So whether you're playing Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto or any of those other games, you can take that 3D visualization technology and apply it directly into oil field. So what's that good for? Training. It's good for 3D visualization of operations. And it'll be used particularly to help train this next generation in how our fields work without having to send them to the field. They can visualize it with a 3D goggles, and it's inexpensive, very effective, and the younger generation is very used to working in a 3D visualized world because they've been playing video games their whole lives. So first R, retrenchment, second R is rediscovery, and the third R, and hopefully the most fun R, is renewal. We always come out of these downturns, and we always do things a little bit differently when we do. And there's several things that I've seen in this year of travel that I think will really be different and renewal for our industry as we come out of this downturn. Number one, and most important, is the big crew change. The generational shift that everyone's been talking about for years. I'm of the generation that came to work in the industry, the big bunch of us that came to work in the late 70s and early 1980s. For the most part, that generation has retired in this downturn. Most of the folks that I went to college with have retired. And so all those people that we were worried about leaving the industry have already left. So when we're in the upturn, it'll be with the millennial generation doing a lot of our engineering work. And that's going to change the way we work, it's going to change the way we manage data, and it's going to be a very different workforce than we've had for the last 30 years or so. There's a second on renewal is that there's a lot of new money coming into the oil and gas industry. We've seen it particularly in the United States, but as I've traveled, you're seeing it trickle out into other parts of the world. And this is the private equity, the venture capital, the private money that's coming into the oil space. It's what started the shale revolution in the United States, but you're also seeing it in other parts of the world. I noticed in Norway, the next generation of local Norwegian companies are almost all private equity backed. You do see it here in Africa. In East Africa, there's several companies that are private equity backed. So there is money out there, different commercial models, different way of financing that will make innovation and new creativity, new renewal different as we come out of this downturn. And then finally, and it's already been alluded to by the minister, and that there will be new commercial models. I talked about in one of my JPT articles about different commercial models, business to business, operator to service company, how we share the wealth, how we contract with each other, will probably change after this downturn, because just throwing a RFP across the fence is not going to work anymore. It's not good for either side, and we need to think of new ways to work together. And then also the new commercial models with the governments. And obviously, you all know about what's going on here in Nigeria. It's a time of a lot of change. But it's not the only country that's having a lot of change around government commercial models. And it's interesting to see that there's different ways that different countries are going with their changes in commercial models. Some have chosen to pull back and to renationalize their businesses. Places like Indonesia and Bolivia, Ecuador have really chosen to renationalize and eliminate a lot of the external operators. And then places like Saudi Arabia and Mexico have chosen to open up and to encourage foreign investment in their industries. So it'll be interesting to see what eventually comes out of all the changes here in Nigeria. And I hope that it will spark a much more investment and much more creativity within the industry here, because you have a lot to give. So my 3 R's, again, were retrench, rediscover, and renew. And I think that's the cycle on the boom and bust that we tend to follow. My August JPT column, so it'll come out on the website, I think, tomorrow, is on Africa. The challenges and the opportunities on this continent, the interesting geology, the interesting projects that are here. There's tremendous potential in all of Africa, but especially here in Nigeria, because you've got a talented workforce that a lot of the other countries don't have, and a long history of involvement and investment in the oil and gas industry. So what'll happen in this boom and bust is that we will ride it out just like a surfer on a wave. You know, when you're in the bottom, it looks pretty bad, but when it's great, you're riding it out on the top of the wave. We've already starting to see signs of recovery. particularly in the United States, but in other areas, you're starting to see investment come back. You're starting to see optimism and capital start to come back into the industry, and we will ride it out. We will retrench, we will rediscover, and we will renew. And the cycle will begin again. So again, I wanted to thank, I'll thank Chevron, who's my employer, who's allowing me to be SPIA president this year, and as a major operator here in Nigeria. I hope that you think as highly of Chevron as I do. And then particularly to thank the Nigeria Council. You have a long history of SPE leadership here in Nigeria, particular our past president, Egbert Omomo, the only African president that SPE has had, and one of the most distinguished of the African gentlemen here. So, and a great friend. This is my 40th year. 40 years as an SPE member. Yes, I did join my first year in university at Texas A&M, and so I did start my SPE leadership as a student section officer. I've been involved, obviously, for many years, and I encourage those of you that are students to start beginning your professional network by being involved and staying involved in SPE. It has been a tremendous part of my life, and I hope it is also a tremendous part of yours. So again, I'm going to get this right, Edupe and Dalu. Thank you for inviting me here. It's been my pleasure, and I look forward to 3 days here with you in Lagos. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we please keep the applause coming for our 2017 SPE International President? She made an effort to greet us in our local dialect, and I want us to greet her in one unique way we know how. I want to get 7 Boza for the SPEI president. Are we ready? On 3, 1, 2, 3, go! You're welcome, ma'am. You're welcome. Your Excellencies, very distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and continuing with keynote presentations, we'll now go over to a global perspective on the theme of our conference this year. A former council chairman and currently President General and country chair for Shell in Gabon, our Nigerian expatriate in Gabon. Please welcome Osa Igihon.
Ladies and gentlemen, permit me to stand on all protocols that have been established. It's great to be back at NIAS, and this time not as a conference chairman or a council chairman, but as an industry player to discuss the conference theme. I'm most honored to have been invited to share my thoughts on this very pertinent subject of the waves of boom and bust in our industry. I will also see this opportunity to share some thoughts on the imperatives that are needed to win in this unfolding business environment. You may not be familiar with this, but I would like to ask you to please read it, all of it. And now that you have read it, I can continue. Let me start by saying that the maxim that the history of our industry since inception has shown that bust and boom is in the DNA of our business. A natural cycle that for well over a century has been the product of market dynamics and geopolitics. The price of oil, the emblematic product of our industry, has largely been impacted by 4 key factors, namely global politics and security, forces of demand and supply, technological innovation, and the health of our global economy. Interestingly, despite these cycles, the onset of the bust has always taken the industry by surprise, and as though it's the first time that it is happening. However, observing the oil price since 1970, for example, one will see that more than 50% of the annual realized oil price has been below $50 per barrel. and that price over $75 per barrel has only been recorded in about 10 of the 47 years. So, a most pertinent question we need to ponder on is what had been learned in the previous busts that had been incorporated in the management of our industry to ensure its resilience at subsequent periods of bust. That said, it is also very important to state that there are emerging factors in addition to the traditional drivers that are now playing a key role in the global energy dynamics. These include unconventional oil and gas supply and the social pressure to decarbonize. These are introducing new volatilities that we have not experienced before now. Many varied viewpoints have been espoused on the subject of whether the cyclical nature of our industry, driven by the booms and busts of product prices, has overall been beneficial or detrimental. I don't think there is a single answer to this question for everyone, but suffice to say that the countries and the businesses that harness the potentials of these cycles have been the victors in this seemingly unpredictable and volatile market. In the periods of boom, with high product prices, there have been increased revenues for investment for sectoral growth, social investment by countries, funding for technological innovation, unlocking new and challenging bases, and increase in employment. On the other hand, in the periods of bust, characterized by low product prices, as we are experiencing now, funding that was previously available for growth is now safeguarded for survival. Exploration and major projects are typically the first set of casualties, as well as drilling and construction activities that are reduced to its barest minimum. These have had a direct knock-on effect on employment, with massive layoffs ensuring and leaving less taxpayers and increasing number of dependents for countries. At a country level, the decline of the petroleum industry revenues also have created distortions in economy and deficits in budget. Examining the case of Nigeria, for example, the 7 to 10% economic growth hitherto predicted by experts, extrapolating the preceding boom period, eventually became successive quarters of economic contraction, leading to the ultimate outcome of one of the most difficult recessions we have experienced in a generation. Several studies and scenario analysis carried out by international agencies, global and regional think tanks, countries and companies are roughly aligned that the global demand for energy will continue to grow, driven by an increase in population, supply dynamics, and the increasing global coalition to mitigate climate change. According to United Nations, global population will increase from about 7 billion to nearly 10 billion by 2050. By 2050, Nigeria's population, which is currently the 7th largest in the world, is predicted to more than double and potentially become the 3rd most populated country in the world. With rising population also comes migration from rural communities to city, where more energy will be required. Lagos, as we all know, is a classic example of this rural to urban migration. When we look at the supply side of things, today oil and gas makes up about half of the primary energy mix. And coal, many people don't know this, still supplies 30% of the global world energy demand. The rest comes from sources such as hydropower, biofuels, solar, wind, nuclear, and renewables. Another thesis from all these studies that have been carried out, where there's alignment, is that the global supply mix will increasingly include renewables. But there is also consensus about the fact that fossil fuel will remain a key energy supply source for many years to come. So when we think about how do we ensure our place in this unfolding scenario, with the unfolding energy demand and supply dynamics, a key question that has occupied all of our minds, country leaders, business leaders,
is what will it take to survive and to win in this more complexly changing energy system. To my mind, the winners in this unfolding vortex of energy dynamics will be countries and businesses that can make the lasting, strategic, and structural changes, not only to survive, but to thrive at current oil price regime. I'm sure you will agree with me that the increased volatility of the global energy dynamics has made the difficult task of future oil price prediction or control far more difficult and complex than it has ever been. Accordingly, to survive and win, we need to focus on the factors that we control, which most of the industry has started working on, and that is to restructure and maintain a low-cost base to survive and win. For countries, strategies and policies that will enable structural improvement in cost, reduction in cost, stimulate capital investment, increase in-country processing, value add, and domestic utilization to diversify our economies in order to accelerate the monetization of our petroleum resources ahead of the transition curve will likely be the winners. As the leading society of professionals in the industry, SPE has a key role to facilitate the institutionalization of this structurally low-cost thinking to stimulate recovery of investment in the current low product price regime, and also to skill its members with the techniques and capabilities needed to support the industry to win. As industry professionals, winners will likely be those that make the mindset shift and equip themselves to create and sustain value in this lower product price and lower cost industry. What will be most enduring is that the lessons from this bust are structurally hardwired into our policies, our strategies, and our operations. And if this happens, then we would have successfully and sustainably navigated one of the most challenging busts in our industry in the last 50 years. Once again, I thank SPE Nigeria for giving me the opportunity to share these thoughts at the openings of this great conference. I thank you all for listening and wish you a wonderful conference experience.
Please keep the applause coming for Osai Gihon, President, Director General, Country Chair, Shell Gabon. Your Excellencies, very distinguished ladies and gentlemen, switching gears to the very last keynote of this opening ceremony is an industry address and the GMD's perspective on the theme of the conference. Please welcome Dr. Mackenty Kachala Baru, represented here by Mr. I beg your pardon. Doctor, please. Adeniran, Babatunde Adeniran, COO Ventures. I don't ever make a mistake with your name, sir. So I don't ever do it. Please welcome Dr. Adeniran for the GMD's industry address.
Okay. Good morning once again. All protocol duly observed. Still standing here on behalf of the Group Managing Director at NNPC, Dr. Mackenty Baru, who is unavoidably absent here this morning. And I've earlier given goodwill message regarding his absence. So the apology still stands. In his message, which I'll go to immediately, and then maybe after make one or two remarks, I am delighted to address this group of professionals from diverse backgrounds on the state of our industry in these interesting times. Indeed, the theme of this year's conference, Riding the Waves of Boom and Bust, Common Objectives, Diverse Perspective, is not only apt, but it presents the current realities in the global oil and gas industry to every discerning mind. Analyzing this theme further, we can say that a common objective for a business venture is profit, profit, and more profit. Interestingly, profit in itself may differ in meaning to different people. How can a company maximize profit in a cyclic oil and gas industry? As you all know, Nigeria, just like most of the contemporaries in the industry, has been adversely affected by the recent tumble in oil prices for obvious reasons. In their economic situations, the first reaction is tightening control on expenditure. Shortly after coming on board as the Group Managing Director of NNPC in 2016, we successfully rolled out our vision for the corporation tagged 12 business focus areas, BUFA, which is aimed at moving NNPC forward together. Under this vision, we have already implemented a number of policies that will place the corporation on the path of growth and profitability. However, NNPC, as it is known, is a wholly owned federal government entity, and as such, subscribes to the government's perspective of profitability. As a government, strategic projects can be viewed as investments for future profit and dividends for the country. Despite the low oil prices, we are taking a long-term view on profitability and investment on behalf of the federal government in oil exploration activities in the Benue Trough and Chad Basin. This is a part of government's plan to reserve growth, as well as the opening of alternative sources for hydrocarbon exploitation. The NNPC, however, regrets the recent sad incident of insurgents' attack, which led to the death of military personnel, University of Maiduguri staff, civilian JTF, as well as the unfortunate kidnap of some staff of the University of Maiduguri involved in exploration activities in the Chad Basin. We observed 1 minute silence for the deceased earlier this morning when the minister was giving a speech. NNPC, in collaboration with the security agencies, is working relentlessly to ensure their rescue and safe return to their loved ones. Our thoughts and prayers are with them and their families. However, in a period of low oil prices, some NNPC JV partners and marginal field producers may opt to maintain and sustain their existing assets rather than commence new exploration activities, especially in new frontiers based on high risk and uncertainties. A clear case of differing perspectives. Ladies and gentlemen, as a corporation, NNPC is committed to reserve growth, and we take this opportunity to advocate to oil industry players to seize this golden opportunity and invest in oil and gas exploration now, as this is the best time to undertake such activities. Permit me to once again commend Yinka Folawiyo Petroleum, an indigenous company which pioneered exploration and development efforts in the Dahomey Basin. Today, their success has opened up the basin for further hydrocarbon exploration and exploitation. As the nation is beginning to pull out of recession, oil prices have dropped to around $50 per barrel. Shortfalls in JV funding has also resulted in declining JV oil production from about 1 million barrels of oil about 3 to 5 years ago to about 800,000 barrels of oil. Given that the sector represents 90% of the nation's foreign exchange earnings, this reduction, coupled with vandalism of critical production infrastructure, had a devastating effect on revenue generation, the environment, as well as the national economy. For the umpteenth time, we call on the perpetrators of these unpatriotic acts to stop in the interest of the nation. It is our belief that host communities stand to gain more from peaceful operations. On our part, we shall continue to step up our community and social responsibility programs as a means of sustaining the recent peace experience in operational areas. I am delighted to say that the economic picture is changing now. The government has pronounced its exit from cash call arrangements with the commitments of setting all funding areas. Oil production based on production sharing contracts arrangement has been witnessing steady increase in production volumes. In fact, towards the end of 2016, ExxonMobil Corporation announced a significant offshore discovery with a potential oil recoverable reserve between 500 million and 1 billion barrels in the Owowo field, which spans across portions of OPL 223 and OML 139. This is very promising news, indicating that some of our producers are still committed for exploration efforts. On the part of government, the JV arrangement is more profitable than PSC arrangements because of equity lifting and JV partners' royalty and tax payments, especially under a low crude oil price regime. Another case of differing perspectives. As I said, the situation in the oil and gas industry is improving. For some time now, we have been producing oil at a sustained level of 2 million barrels per day. Vandalism of infrastructure has dropped to a new level. These are all the results of interventions by the government. The Honorable Minister of State for Petroleum Resources should be commended for leading the push to ensure the non-application of oil production cuts by OPEC on Nigeria. Based on the presidency's intervention, the industry has been witnessing a calm operating environment in the Niger Delta. We are very appreciative of government's effort and urge other stakeholders to join hands towards ensuring a peaceful, environmentally friendly, profit-generating industry. Certain strategies were adopted by NNPC to curtail the effect of low oil prices. The renegotiation of JV and PSC contracts in line with the tumbling crude oil price has saved the corporation billions of dollars. Other strategic approaches, such as promotion of synergy and collaboration among stakeholders, thereby encouraging resource pooling, shortening contracting cycles, and facility sharing, have posted positive results. Ladies and gentlemen, the NNPC has resolved to develop its domestic refining capacity, thereby positioning itself to take advantage of improved refining margin during periods of these low oil prices. NNPC's strategic plan for gas to deliver 5 billion scf per day to the domestic market by 2020 is still ongoing. To be clear, NNPC definitely doesn't intend to lose focus on retaining and expanding Nigeria's share of the global market. The recent drive by the Ministry of Petroleum and NNPC to create an enabling environment for growth of the domestic gas market cannot be overemphasized. So far, over 1,000 kilometers of major gas pipelines have been laid and commissioned. An additional 470 kilometers is currently in construction phase, while a further 1,400 kilometers is intended for construction before the end of 2017. Also, along with the development of physical infrastructure, commercial frameworks are being put in place to support the growth of the domestic gas market. Progress has also been made in the reduction of flared gas volumes from a peak of 2.5 billion scf per day a couple of years ago to about a current volume of 700 million scf per day. We envisage a near zero flare in not too distant future as adequate infrastructure and frameworks are being put in place. Government's intention to develop the market will be made clear in the prospective investors. Based on the projected domestic gas supply deficit of 38 of 3 billion scf per day, NNPC identified 7 critical gas development projects, which can be delivered in the short and medium term to bridge the impending gas supply shortfall. I held a stakeholder forum with the 7 project owners in Abuja on the 9th of May 2017, where I made it clear that funding for the identified projects will not be an impediment to their successful completion. In the event that the JVs or NPDC, as the case may be, fail to raise the required funds, opportunities may be extended to third-party investors to help finance the projects. Commitments received from the various stakeholders who attended the event are quite impressive. Target delivery date for this project is Q4 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, we have survived a very trying period, and I can tell you that better days are yet to come. We may have varying perspectives, but our common objective is one: growing and sustaining our individual and joint businesses. My hope is that by the end of this conference, we would have resolved to apply our different perspectives towards a common objective of nurturing a strong oil and gas industry that can ride the waves of a boom and weather the storm of a bust. Thank you all for listening, and I wish you fruitful deliberations during the conference. Thank you very much. Maybe just 1 or 2 comments. And my first comment is just to re-echo what the Group General Manager, NNPC Research and Development, talked about this morning. NNPC management is giving all the necessary support to the division, at least to place it where it's supposed to be. We are looking at an R&D that will be a center of excellence in the sub-Saharan Africa. So I want to seize this opportunity to please appeal to us to patronize our R&D. A lot of things are going on there. We have there's a discussion about Cypher Crescent company that they are partnering with on some softwares for our reservoir analysis. Also, for the first time, you have, when you get to their stand, you have standing side by side Schlumberger and Halliburton, put together with projects that are going on in R&D. So we want you to come and partner with us on these projects, and we say thank you very much to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Babatunde Adeniran. Please, one more time, a round of applause for the COO Ventures, representing the GMD NNPC. Your Excellencies, very distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of the opening ceremony. As the International President alluded in her speech, we cannot stop the wave, but we can certainly learn how to surf. And I think all the presentations that we've had in this opening ceremony and the many that will follow, as our council chairman said, will attempt to teach us how to ride these waves. We will rise for the national anthem, after which the VIP tour of the exhibition will take place. After that, the VIP launch will happen at the 1415 restaurant in Eco Signature, and it's strictly by invitation. That launch is sponsored by Chevron. My name is Richmond Osuji. I have my colleague Tim Lelua who will be with me throughout the conference, and I will see you here at 1:30 for the Tropical Issues Workshop. 1:30 here. The YPs, check the program. It's about the same time. Your own venue will be at the upper suite. Let's rise, please, for the national anthem. Again, we are singing the national anthem. On 3. 1, 2, 3. Nigeria's call obey to serve our father's land with love and strength and faith. The labor of our heroes past shall never be in vain. To serve with heart and might, one nation bound in freedom, peace and unity. Now, please, let's not crowd the exit. For the next 2-3 minutes, just remain seated. Allow the council chair, lead the GMD's rep, the international president, and other VIPs towards the exhibition, and then we can exit behind them. So for now, for the next few minutes, just remain seated. Remember, Tropical Issues Workshop here at 1:30. If you've not downloaded the app, please go to Google Play Store, search for NAIS 2017, capital letters, NAIS 2017, no space. Register with your profile and continue and start using the app. I will see you at 1:30 for the Tropical Issues Workshop. Thank you.